Before the 2010 election, Alabama's state legislature had been controlled by the Democratic Party for 136 years. But in 2010, Republicans knew they were going to have a good year overall, and they hatched a plan to use the momentum of that big Republican year and also a complicated, sketchy national fundraising scheme. They hatched a plan basically to take over Alabama politics in 2010, and it worked. The Alabama Republican chairman who orchestrated the whole thing, he wrote this book about it, Storming the State House. And in 2010, for the first time since 1874, Republicans took control in Alabama. They took the Alabama legislature. And the author of that book, the guy who orchestrated the whole takeover, they elected him Speaker of the House. And then they indicted him on 23 felony corruption counts. His name is Mike Hubbard. And in October, while he was still serving as Speaker of the House, he was hit with nearly 24 felony ethics charges. He was arrested. He was charged. It was 2 weeks before the November election. In that November election, with the 23 felony charges pending against him, he was handily reelected to his seat in the Alabama House. And then his fellow Republicans in the Alabama House reelected him Speaker. And so here's his mugshot. There are headlines in the Alabama papers all the time, basically every day, about his impending trial and how he's defending himself against these 23 felony corruption charges. But meanwhile, he continues to serve as basically the most powerful public official in the state of Alabama while under indictment. Alabama doesn't much seem to mind, but it is an awkward thing. And he's not the only one. Just a couple of weeks before Alabama Speaker of the House Mike Hubbard was indicted and fingerprinted and had his mugshot taken in Alabama, just a few weeks before that, 2 states over in South Carolina, they too arrested their Speaker of the House. It happened in September. It was South Carolina's Republican House Speaker, Bobby Harrell. He was indicted on 9 felony corruption charges. Now, at least he had the decency to resign once he pled guilty. Pleading guilty saved him from 6 years in prison. He instead got probation. He had to pay a fine. But he did also have to give up that sweet, sweet job as Speaker of the South Carolina House. And it's not just in the South where this is a problem. The great state of Massachusetts, where I live, not that long ago, Massachusetts had a spectacular run with House Speakers in which 3 of them in a row were not just charged, but convicted of felonies. 3 in a row. Come on now. But now it's happened again. And this one might have ripple effects for at least one Democratic politician who I think wants to be taken seriously as a potential contender for the White House someday. This time, the House Speaker who has been hit with multiple felony corruption charges is from the great state of New York. And I know what you're thinking. New York? There's someone in state government in New York who isn't already in prison or out on bail? I know the list of state senators and people from the state assembly who are in jail or who have pled guilty or who are under indictment or who have been censured or thrown out of the assembly or the Senate because of their various crimes. It is literally almost too many to list. What we're scrolling through here is just a sprinkling from a handy rogues gallery of members of the state assembly and state senate and their criminal actions, which was published today by the New York Times. But the guy who they arrested today, he's a little different than all the rest of those other guys because he is the guy who's in charge. A lot of people say that he's not just the guy in charge of the state assembly as speaker. A lot of people consider this guy to be the guy who basically runs the state of New York and who has run the state of New York for 20 years now. He's a Democrat named Sheldon Silver. He's been in the state assembly since 1974. He's been Speaker of the state assembly since 1994. When people talk about how things are done in New York State, for a generation now, people have said that New York makes all its deals, all its policy, all its laws by a New York system they call 3 guys in a room. One of those 3 guys in the room is whoever's governor at the time. One of those 3 guys in the room is whatever schmo is running the state senate for a minute before he goes to prison. But for 20 years now, the constant, the 3rd guy in the room, the guy who runs everything forever, even as everybody else cycles in and out of the place, that has been, for a generation now, Sheldon Silver. And today, they arrested Sheldon Silver, and they hit him with 5 felony corruption charges. In the criminal complaint filed today, federal prosecutors allege that he basically had a no-work job at a law firm or 2, which paid him millions of dollars. The complaint says he used his position as the most powerful man in New York to tell people with business before the state that they ought to use certain law firms. And then he would get a kickback for having sent that business to those firms.
For many years, New Yorkers have also asked the question, what exactly does Speaker Silver do to earn his substantial outside income? Well, the head-scratching can come to an end on that score, too, because we answer that question today as well. He does nothing. As alleged, Speaker Silver never did any actual legal work. He simply sat back and collected millions of dollars by cashing in on his public office and his political influence.
Preet Bharara, the U.S. attorney, the federal prosecutor who brought this case today, he made clear that this arrest of the House Speaker, this indictment today, derived from an investigation that was started by a New York State Ethics Commission. Ethics Commission was set up to restore public trust in the profoundly corrupt government of New York State. That commission was formed after the last big wave of arrests of New York State lawmakers. They founded this commission to make everybody feel better about New York State ethics by investigating what they are. That ethics commission was disbanded suddenly last spring by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Sheldon Silver really wanted that ethics commission to go away. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo made it go away without much explanation. The U.S. attorney then seized that commission's files and pledged to continue that commission's work, even though Cuomo had shut the whole thing down. And now, that investigation, continued by the federal prosecutor, has resulted in the arrest and in 5 felony charges against the most powerful man in New York politics, Democratic House Speaker Sheldon Silver. And maybe Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, maybe he is going to run for president someday. But let it be known nationwide that there is a mega aggressive federal prosecutor in New York who is busy locking up New York State politicians one after the other, one by one, up and down the state. And he is making no secret about his feelings about Governor Andrew Cuomo. And today that prosecutor arrested and indicted his biggest fish yet, the closest thing New York has to a permanent political power. In the past 5 months, this is the 3rd House Speaker arrested and indicted on felony charges in our country. It's almost enough to make you think that politics has become a very dirty business.